Good morning, NASPO. My name is Rachel Doherty. I am Chief Procurement Officer, State of Minnesota. I'm also an attorney. Sometimes I debate which hat I would rather wear, often both. Jay?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jay Wyatt. I'm the Chief Information Accessibility Officer, or CHAO. That's the reason why I took the job, because it's a great title. And so we're going to talk to you a little bit about accessibility today, as well as about the upcoming law. And I'm really looking forward to have the opportunity to talk with you. But first, I want to take a selfie. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pull off my phone. Come on, and put everybody in here. And all you have to do is say, "Ciao." Thank you very much.
I want to add, it's a little bit of a full circle moment for me. When I first started training in procurement, my first boss was Justin Kaufman, who's a chief lawyer here. And Justin, when he asked me to take 20 minutes of training, and after 20 minutes, he didn't come back. And he just left me to finish the training. And that's how I learned that I can handle it. And I was terrified of someone asking a question and not being able to answer it. And guess who asked a question? Who was sitting front row? Mr. Wyatt here. So he asked a question that I was able to answer. But anyways, so now I'm training with Jay, and Justin's here. So anyways, that's kind of a little bit of a full circle. So.
Very much. All right, can you please take your phone, point at the QR code, either here or there, and quickly tell us where you're at. We'd love to find out a little more about exactly what kind of background you have with accessibility.
It's okay if you click A. That's okay.
Yeah,
But
they've heard of it. 2% never have heard about it, okay? But just like most people are between, they've heard of it, and they dip their toes into it, which is perfect for our talk, I think.
Yep, perfect.
All right. Thank you all for that. Okay, why don't you go ahead? So let's talk about why we're doing this. What's the point of talking about digital accessibility? Why should you, procurement officers, even care about it? And we'll start with Rachel first, and then I'll dive into more details.
So I would call myself, when we started talking about how to get accessibility incorporated into our procurement process, I would describe myself maybe as skeptical, maybe a little bit reluctant. We sat in a work group and we talked over and over and over again, and it felt really daunting. And part of the reason it felt really daunting is because we just didn't have a ton of accessibility experts around the state. And you really do need people who understand accessibility to work it into your process. And during the pandemic, when we used to have paper contracts, and people would march them to our office and drop them off, and we would sign them and return them. And when the pandemic hit, that went out the window, and we moved really quickly, and I'm very proud that we did it so quickly. We moved to a paperless environment. But when we moved to the paperless environment, it actually opened up the doors to accessibility for a lot of the people that we served. Especially, we have an agency, Department of Employment and Economic Development, and they have state services for the blind integrated into their department. And they were actually able, there's concessioners they exist in in our office buildings, and they're often operated by state services for the blind, and they could sign those contracts, and they could read and understand them. And that was huge. And we had an incident where somebody took the contract, they printed it out, and they signed it, and then presented it to one of those blind concessioners. And they had to read the contract out loud to that person. And I just thought about that, and we took away that person's independence to some degree. We took away their dignity and able to read and hold and understand a document themselves. So by just removing it from that electronic environment, and it really did make me realize how much this matters. and that we have to do a better job of integrating it into our procurement processes and also integrating it into our documents and our digital documents. Hand it over to you, Jay.
Okay. So she mentioned someone who was blind. Let's talk about generally what it is to have a disability. So you see on the screen a pickle jar. Imagine that you have to open that jar. You can't do it. You twist it hard as you can. You bang it upside down on the table. You put it under hot water. You do everything you can. You've done it before, right? You can't open the jar. So we see the clicker work. There we go. Whose fault is it? Is it you because you just are weak? Or is it the jar? Did the jar actually present an obstacle that was unnecessary? So the World Health Organization defined the disability as mismatch interaction. Okay? And by that, we're talking about a mismatch between what the person wants to achieve and the situation that is not supported. And that, for me, is the difference between what we call the medical model of a disability and the social model of disability. So, for example, I'm an example of the medical model. I was born deaf. I have bilateral cochlear implants, which you can see. Those implants are amazing. The technology is incredible. I hear far better than I ever could otherwise. I mean, I never heard birds before until I got the implant. And now I realize they do not shut up. So the technology is incredible. But you could tell from my accent, the way I speak, I am still deaf. I still have to look at your face in order to really understand what you are saying. You'll see when Rachel's talking, I'm looking at her, so I know what she's saying. So the medical model has done something to intervene, but it has not cured me. By the same token, the social model is, you come to a conference, there's no captioning. I'm not trying to make NASPO feel bad, but there's no captioning. There's no ability for me to be welcomed into the environment, or that I don't even have to think about my hearing loss. So that's when we talk about accessibility, what we're trying to do, what we are doing, is create a digital environment that creates an equitable world for everyone. And then on top of that, we can layer accommodation like a screen reader for a deaf person or a blind person, captioning, or other assistive technology. But those assistive technologies don't work unless the content is accessible. Okay? So accessibility, bring that floor up. And it's the floor, not the ceiling. You start with accessibility, and then you go from there. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay? Take a moment. So what is digital accessibility? It is definable, measurable, and testable. It's not like art, where you go, more or less accessible. It's something you can measure. It's something you can test. And it applies to all digital content. Your website, your app, the documents, he talked about everything. So for example, we talk about the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, or WCAG for short. So from now on, I'll say WCAG, and I'm talking about the guideline. They are owned by an organization called the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C. They're the ones that literally own the definition of HTTP, FTP, all those protocols. So for example, when you open your browser and you go to a website, you know that your browser, whether it's Safari or Firefox or Chrome, will work with that website because they follow a set of standards that the W3C has defined. Okay? So within the W3C, they have the guidelines. And those guidelines have 4 principles, as you see on the screen. We'll call it the POUR principle. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Now, as lawyers, you're probably thinking, most of you, I don't know not all of you are lawyers, but perceivable, that's an interesting word. It's not like most of you, when you look at a website, you're seeing the website. But you can also perceive it through sound. You can also perceive it through feel, like through a refreshable braille reader. So there are multiple ways to obtain or perceive that information. And you must be able to do it by whatever modality you require. Same thing for operable. Some people may operate by the mouse. Others may operate by the keyboard, and only the keyboard, not even touching the mouse because they can't. or they may operate through speech, like through Dragon Naturally Speaking. Again, that content must be operable no matter what modality. If it does not, it's not accessible. Then understandable. So you've all heard of plain language. I know you all try to use plain language in your contract now, which is wonderful. But it's not just plain language. It's how you organize it, how you orient and design the site so that when you perceive it, you are understanding the organization and structure and meaning of the content. Then there's robust. At its most core form, robust means that it does not break when you attempt to use assistive technology. People who, like the person Rachel was talking about, so many times when he tried to use a screen reader to operate a website or application, it failed because it doesn't work, it's not robust enough. So those are the principles. And within these principles, see the slide. Here's a screenshot of the WCAG guidelines in the quick reference form. You can see that we've got one digit for the principle, the guideline, and then the success criteria. The success criteria, which have three numbers, 1.2.1, 1.2.2, are all measurable and definable. So you can design, build, and create accessible information. And like Rachel said, at a certain level, it's good to have experts figure out to do it at a very basic level without having to know a whole lot about it. So a brief segue, physical and digital accessibility. There's some overlap and not much. So physical accessibility, ADA is 35 years old this year. 35 years old. Some of you are young enough and have never known a world without the ADA, which is wonderful. And we're still working on it. We're still fighting about it. The Americans with Disabilities Act was made well before the internet became really much of a thing. So the U.S. Department of Justice implied, they took the implication of the ADA and said the digital world applied to it, starting around 1998 to 2000. So the digital world started becoming more and more a sphere where we can define accessibility and require it. Okay, so for digital accessibility, the wide range of disabilities impacted by it. We hear a number between 11 to 25% of people in the world have a disability. Some of them may be significant or not so significant, but we know a lot of people have it, and most of you will at some point in your life. Like this gentleman here who just came up, he has a disability now for a moment. He can't really move that easily. It's temporary, but he has it. So that will happen to us in many different ways. So we have cognitive disability, motor disability to cognitive. Can I see when I'm reading? Can I have the cognitive load? A great example for you for cognitive disability is, imagine you with a 2-year-old child, if you ever had one, or if you have friends who have one, and you're on a phone call, and the child is trying to talk to you and bother you at the same time that you're on your phone call. Your cognitive load is now increasing. You're trying to manage both the business conversation and the conversation with your child. Now imagine having that all the time. All the time. Imagine trying to focus on your contract, on your work that you're trying to do with the constant interaction with a 2-year-old bother you all the time. Is that information easy to read? Can you absorb that information? Can you structure in a way that you can actually do that? That's what you want to think about when you're thinking about cognitive disability. Motor disability, you have tremor. I can't use my mouse because I can't point, so I'm just going to use the keyboard. Okay? Hearing, well, you got me as a good example of that, plus the tinnitus, and the things where you're always hearing sound, no matter what. Then vision, we could be partially blind. Most people, very few people have full blindness, but a lot of people have an ocular syndrome. They need to be able to expand the screen, have a wide screen, and magnify the screens. We have an experience lab on our website, which you can go to. It's really kind of fun to experience different kinds of disability. So I would reiterate to you, accessibility is a civil right. It's not a nice thing to have. It's a civil right. As of next April, it will be written into the Americans with Disabilities Act, April 24th, 2026. That's why we're talking about it today. But we've been applying that, and Rachel will talk about some case law for the last 25 years. And if you don't do something about accessibility and you get into a suit or a complaint or something, you're going to spend a lot more money trying to fix something than if you had done it right in the first place. And there are tools where you can actually do that right in the first place. So let's think about other reasons to support accessibility. You see that I've got a combine. What might make you think of that? What might that make you think of? I'll give you an idea. For example, think about broadband. Think about the areas in the state where you don't yet have broadband. On my phone, I don't download images by default, right? It's a lot easier that way. I don't have to worry about loading up a lot of images on my phone. So I get an email, and the email is an invitation to something, and the invitation is an image. Do I want to download this? But if I have alternative text, if you write alternative text into the image, which is the mechanism for making images machine readable, I can read that invitation if they do it right without having to open the image. Same thing for somebody in a rural area who does not have enough bandwidth to download images. How are they going to tell whether the image is relevant for them? If it's accessible, they will be able to find out. Or imagine even more rural area with older people who are not digitally literate, and yet they have to go online to take care of Medicare, Medicaid, other health issues, money, everything else, and it's all online. Low bandwidth, no literacy. Accessibility, again, is a way to make things better because accessibility makes the technology work better. It's not an add-on. It's something built into HTML5 that makes technology work better. That's why the World Wide Web Consortium makes a big deal about this.
Well, an accessible design is good design. Like, accessible documents feel better when you use them. They look better. They're easier to use. And that's something like once you learn the principles of accessibility, like I don't ever create a document anymore without using headers. And you all have those accessibility quick cards in front of you, and that like teaches you how to make your digital documents accessible. And I think once you start, you probably won't go back.
Thank you, and thanks for reminding me about the quick card. They put them on your table. If there are more people on the table than there are cards, they have more up front. Please take them with you. Please don't be shy. Please don't leave any on the table. I don't want to take them home with me. So take them, and the quick cards, again, are reminders. There are training available on our website to help you learn more about accessibility. Then the quick card will help remind you how to use that training. Okay? So again, those are tools to remind you, oh yeah, these are the things I need to do, but they're not full information about accessibility to themselves. Now, my office, the Office of Accessibility, is inside Minnesota IT Services, the centralized IT organization for the state of Minnesota. Does that mean accessibility is an IT job? Well, think about it. When an agency wants to buy a technology or a service and they go to the Office of State Procurement to do it, who is making the decision on what functions it will do, what purpose it will serve, and how will it work? The agency. IT is there to help them fulfill that. When the agency has a website or has documents, and they create the content and they post on the website or post the document, who's doing that? The IT entity or the agency? You know the answer to that. Accessibility is everyone's job. Based on your role, you may do something different if you are a content creator, a developer, a designer, a product owner, project manager, contract manager. Everyone has to know something relevant to their work to make accessibility work. If any one of those people do not do their job, that's more work for everyone else. So what does accessibility look like? We've been talking about why. Now let's talk about the how. And so let's take a look. Okay, another slide. There we go. So the basic guidelines for all content. This is website, document, app. They all follow pretty much the basic same concept. First of all, you need structure. So if you're like me, if you open your browser, you've got way too many tabs open at the top. And you might have like 3 or 4 tabs from the same website. Well, each of those tabs should see something different. If you go to a website and the same thing is on all 4 tabs, that means they have not defined the property that that page be relevant for that content. That means somebody who has a disability, when they open to a tab, they can tell which page on that site they are. So that's one thing about structure. Another point is like your heading. So when you have a document, your contract, your RFP, anything, and you have the page laid out, you got the big heading for the top, you got the next big heading to the next level. They're all visually sized, but there's also structure behind it. It should be in heading level 1, heading level 2, just like an outline, heading level 3, and your Word or Google Docs or whatever you use needs your capability to style, to define those headings. So you can imagine, for example, if, again, this gentleman that Rachel was presenting this to, that document, which was either a scanned document or an inaccessible document, one way he could not use it with a screen reader was, now remember, we perceive a website by looking at it and quickly deciding where we're going to go. But if you can't see it, you perceive it some other way. You might say, for example, give me a list of headings. And then the website comes back with heading 4, heading 6, heading 2. Where am I? What's the order? Am I missing something here? But if it comes back with heading 1, heading 2, heading 2, heading 3, heading 3, heading 2, I've got a well-defined structure. I know what the content is about. I can make a decision of where I want to go and jump there instead of having to go line by line and wait a lot of time to find my spot. So structure is very important. Same thing with navigation. I think we all like to have the pages be the same, or if the page changes, it's because the content type changes. And that redesign gives you an idea of why that change is there. In images and non-text elements, I mentioned alternative text. That's a great example where you have an image. Whether you're using a web app or using Facebook or LinkedIn, you should be able to open the image and then write alternative text so that someone who cannot see the image will see it well, can read why you put that image there. Color contrast. Again, people with vision issues, even if you're getting older like me, you're wearing reading glasses or glasses, a lot of designers seem to think gray text on gray background is really cool, but it makes it really hard to read. And there are very specific tools that actually measure that. So it's a 4.5 to 1 ratio for text on background, 3 to 1 ratio for text next to each other. So very simple, very easy to measure and make it and achieve. Meaningful link. How many of you have opened up a SharePoint link? You open your page, you see the 5-line gobbledygook of SharePoint. Fun, huh? But what if you have actually the text that says, where are you going? And here's a great keyboard shortcut. You have a keyboard shortcut on the card. Great keyboard shortcut down on there, Control-K. You select the text itself. Hit Control-K, and the box opens up, and you put the URL in there and click OK. And hey, it's so much easier to read. You read the text that tells you where to go, and then hyperlink. You go there. So Control-K, remember that one. Forms are a whole other ball of wax. I don't want to talk about forms right now. You want to talk about forms, come talk to me later. But the basic thing is, forms are not a simple thing, and you need to make sure you do it right when it's not accessible at all.
You guys may notice that Jay and I are not using the NASPO slide deck. And one of the reasons why we're not using the NASPO slide deck is we know that our slide deck provided by our IT services is accessible. And anyways, even last night, Jay was pointing out that as someone maybe altered the slide deck that we were using and was having trouble converting to PDF, so issues come up. But you can solve them with the right tools. So a history of lawsuits. So you can see that lawsuits relating to accessibility are on the rise. I think we can likely expect more of that with the new standard going into place on April 26th. And we are here to help you avoid those. Here is a little bit of case law. There's not a ton of actual case law on accessibility, but this is Robles versus Domino Pizza, and a person who was blind wanted to order a pizza, but the pizza ordering app and the website were not digitally accessible, and the alternative was to wait hours on the phone to order that pizza, which would be pretty annoying. And Roble sued Domino's for violation of the ADA. And the ADA ruled that it applied, but they did not have a fair notice that its website and app needed to comply with those ADA standards. Then it appealed, allowed it to go forward, and then they ordered Domino's to make their website accessible in accordance with the WCAG guidelines. And one of the things that when I was preparing for this presentation, I decided to see if I could book my flight to, we know that NASPA books them for us, but I just wanted to see, can I book my flight to Savannah? And I used a major airline, their website, and I was able to use the keyboard to navigate and book my flight. Then I went to a low budget airline, and I did not get very far at all when I was trying to book my flight. And imagine how annoying it would be to have to get on the phone with an airline, especially right now. So little things make a huge difference, and it's a huge inconvenience to have to do things like call when we live in an environment that a lot of the infrastructure around us is no longer prepared to take phone calls. Some other accessibility issues, Gill versus Winn-Dixie, Florida court ruled that their website was subject to ADA accessibility. That was later overturned. And Ellerby versus Louisiana Division of Administration, sorry, Louisiana, but a federal court in Louisiana denied the state's motion to dismiss, and you couldn't access the state government websites, reinforcing the ADA's application to government websites. So this alluded to what's coming and what's going to hit us on April 26th. And then I couldn't believe this, but Netflix didn't have closed captioning for quite some time, and they were sued over it and had to build that into their streaming service. And when we're talking about the impact of digitally inaccessible workplaces, the first time I actually gave this presentation was at the Employment Institute, but this matters. Employees, your ERP system, they may not be able to enter their time, view their pay stub, or access employee benefits. They may not be able to use the software or applications that are critical to perform their job. And one of the things that was said in those meetings I was sitting with Jay in was we should not be picking and choosing who can work for the government based on the things that we buy. And and it's we all know what those critical pieces of software. And if that software is not accessible, you could really eliminate somebody from being able to apply to that job, someone with a lot of talent. If your if your hiring system is not accessible, which I think ours was a free add-on to our ERP system, and it was not accessible, but employees may not be able to apply to jobs. There's reduced productivity. If you are going and having to remediate documents, it's so much harder to remediate things than it is to just create accessible documents in the first place. And then there's just legal costs and damage to reputation. And our website, up until maybe 2-3 years ago, honestly looked like it was created in 1998. And in order to prepare for this new environment, our website was redone. And it looks so much better. It's so much easier to use. It has much less text. It's easier to navigate. And that's just a good thing, to have a website that's usable to your customers and to employees. Now, there isn't a ton of case law on digital accessibility in the workplace. We see some cases that rise up. They're usually settled. But any ideas why we don't have a lot of case law? And part of it is it's hard to ask for accommodations, which is why starting from the first place of having accessible software, creating digitally accessible documents, that means somebody doesn't have to ask for an accommodation if they have a disability. And a lot of disabilities are invisible. You don't necessarily know that somebody has a disability, and it might be very hard for them to tell you that they do, and they're having trouble reading a website, for instance. But I would say things are changing, and we know the standard that's coming, which is the Title II of the Americans with Disability Act, and it requires state and local government to make their websites, mobile apps, and content accessible. So the technical standard is that you have to comply with the WCAG 2.1 level A and AA. And all digital content, so your training materials, third-party applications, and documents all must be accessible. So if you're doing training, your training has to be accessible. So if you're posting training, you need to have, for instance, closed captions on that training. Third-party content that public entities use to deliver services. So if you have someone needs to log in, and fill out an application in a system, that system needs to be digitally accessible. There are limited exceptions, but they're going to require documentation. So the deadline is April 26, 2026 for public entities with populations of more than 50,000, which I believe is probably every person in this room. And then smaller entities have another year to get to compliance. So what can you do? We're talking about these standards, and I talked about how frustrating at times it was to integrate these standards into our procurement process. So this is where we're going to talk about it and the different things that you can use. So first, what are you buying and how does accessibility apply to it? So if you are buying software, so when we're talking software, it might be a custom-built system. It could be commercial off-the-shelf COTS or software as a solution, a SaaS solution. It's website development and it's your digital documents. So then you have to think about how are you communicating your accessibility needs in your procurement documents. And you have to use a belt and suspenders approach. So the belt is your solicitation. What is in your solicitation to cover your accessibility needs? There's multiple ways that you can go about it. If it is, right in the introduction of, what you're trying to buy, what are your goals? You can, this needs to be a digitally accessible solution. You can integrate it into your evaluation criteria. And you could ask for a narrative response on their experience with accessibility, or you could require specific documents, which we'll talk about on the next slide, that will help you gauge whether the vendor is accessible. But then there's the suspenders, which is your contract. You have to build accessibility as a requirement into your contract. And we have that built into our documents, where there's an accessibility standard, and there's also a separate standard for digitally accessible documents. And that's and part of getting that standard that you integrate into your contract is to have a standard for your state in the first place. So, and then it's what are you doing along the way to ensure that the thing that you are procuring is accessible? Because you can't just cross your fingers, close your eyes, and hope. You are going to have to verify. So if it's a software solution, you are going to want to do accessibility testing to ensure that that system is in fact accessible. And in the beginning, middle, and end of your contract, I had a really unfortunate situation. It was actually digital documents where the agency was required to post them on their website, by statute. They had to post these documents. And they did not check up on accessibility at any point up until the very end. And it was like a 500 to 1,000 page document, and it was not accessible, and they could not post it to their website. They had a useless deliverable that they paid a lot of money for, and they did not at that time have that suspender approach in their contract, so there was not much to hold the contractor accountable to creating those accessible documents. So you can buy some very expensive things that are very useless if you do not build this stuff into your process. And then so there's accessibility testing. You can test software systems, you can test digital documents, and there's different degrees of testing. There's manual testing, there's automated testing. One thing if you have engaged with your Microsoft applications, you can turn on accessibility checker, and it can be like on the side of your screen, and it will show you the things that you are doing incorrectly as you build that document. But then the other thing is involve and engage accessibility experts. And I say experts, like Jay, you probably need an expert at Jay within your organization. But you can also you can train people within your own agency. We found it very hard to hire people with the necessary skills to be accessibility experts, but we have found success in training them. And at least they know enough to be dangerous. And that matters. It helps get you, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. So reviewing our tools, and this I would say was probably one of the biggest barriers for me when I was trying to how do we integrate this into the procurement process. And it was hard for me because I didn't understand these tools, and I didn't understand when they should be applied, and I didn't understand their limitations, and it's really important to understand those things. So we've talked about the voluntary product accessibility template. We call it the VPAT. And it's a document that's filled out by the vendor that explains how software, hardware, electronic content conforms to accessibility standards. Then there is a policy-driven adoption for accessibility, which I found out last night that we worked with the state of Massachusetts on that. And this is a tool that allows vendor organizations to measure their internal support for accessibility. Then there's your terms and conditions. We all have terms and conditions, which are probably too long, but there's specific provisions that put vendors on notice that accessibility requirements will apply to the final deliverable. And we have a sample contract that goes out with all of our solicitations, and that standard is built into those terms and conditions in the sample contract. Then there's that accessibility testing. So the process of evaluating digital documents to ensure they are accessible. I mentioned it could be manual, automated, or it can test specific automated or assistive technology to see that it works with the product. The Word and the PowerPoint, all those tools are nice. They're not perfect. They do not really replace full accessibility testing. If they're going to be posted to your website, I would have probably somebody that has more expertise than you're going to find in Microsoft Word to review those documents. But now we're going to talk about applying those tools. So custom software, how do you ensure the people building it understand and are capable? This is a custom solution, and I mentioned the VPAT. And VPATs are for completed projects. They're for things that have already been done. So it's not going to tell you that what you are buying is going to be accessible. It can tell you how much knowledge the vendor has. It can, if you combine it with a demonstration and testing of the solution that they're outlining in their VPAT, that can tell you something about how capable the vendor is. And then the PDAA, asking them to provide, and this gets to how is accessibility integrated into your own organization. Jay will tell you that if you have a culture of accessibility within an organization, they are more likely to produce something that is accessible. When we're talking about software as a solution and commercial off the shelf, you're going to want to request that VPAT for those solutions. And then if you are planning any sort of customization, you're also going to want to ask for that PDAA. And the important thing to know about the VPAT here is sometimes the VPAT happens at a point in time. So if that VPAT is 2 years old, and for that SaaS solution is very different than it was 2 years ago. So you're going to want to request an updated VPAT. And I would say the same applies to a lot of commercial off-the-shelf stuff as well, because that, as soon as you install something new, you're going to have to do updates, and we want those updates to be accessible as well. Websites, that is probably some of the, I would say, lowest hanging fruit in your organizations to get accessible. And you're going to want to ask for the PDAA, and then a demonstration or testing of some previous website development that they've done. And then digital documents. A PDAA is a good idea if they are going to be creating a 500-page document that's going to be posted to a website. And you can see if that is, if they have the knowledge and ability to make that accessible. So when we're contracting for it, we want to incorporate a standard. It should be a standard in your contract document that you communicate. Our standard is the WCAG Level A and Section 508. And then there's an accessible document standard that is outlined. And I would say that the digital documents are another thing that's pretty low-hanging fruit that we should tackle and make sure that the vendors that are creating things for us have the ability to make those accessible. You have to build the accessibility check into the contract deliverables anytime there is custom development or digital documents. So this testing can occur at the beginning, middle, and end. And one thing I will say about the testing, and when we're talking about how do we procure things that are, because the vendors can tell you the nicest tale in the entire world. They might show you something that they created that they say is accessible. But it doesn't mean that when they go to work for you that they're necessarily going to be able to do that. So you have to engage in the testing, and we found we don't have enough experts at the state of Minnesota to do all the testing that we need for accessibility. So we have IT consultant services contract master contract program, and we have a subset of vendors in there that are approved for accessibility testing. So that is something that we'll build into the deliverables of our contract, and we put the vendor on notice that you are going to be tested multiple times throughout this process and that you need to be ready for this. And I will also say, like, that's something that we probably need to do on making sure it's in our NASPO value point contracts, that we're putting that standard in there and protecting the people that are buying off of those contracts as well in getting accessible deliverables. And you really want to have your accessibility experts integrated into the review of your deliverables. So they're part of your team. And it's like when we talk about all the people that have to come to the party when we're doing a request for proposal, when we have a contracting team that is overseeing a project. Those accessibility experts are important. I think it's really important to talk too about the stuff that we have. And we all have a lot of things, and I promise that a lot of it is probably not accessible because we haven't had this as a standard. Many organizations haven't. Others are more advanced. But so I would focus first on areas of high impact and high touch. That's typically going to be your websites, and it's going to be systems with public interactions. So those are the things that you want to tackle first. And then you have to develop a plan. What is your plan? Are you going to remediate it, or are you going to replace it? Remediation is expensive. It's time-consuming. It doesn't always necessarily work because building things from the ground up that are accessible is really important. So a lot of times, if this is a system that is high impact and high touch, you may have to replace that. And the things that you want to consider are the cost. What does this cost to remediate or replace? How much time is it going to take? Right now we have, I don't know, what is it, maybe 6 months? And then what is the impact? And I think the impact matters a lot. I mentioned the Department of Employment and Economic Development. That would be an agency that I would be more concerned about because the people that are more likely to use their website are they could be people with disabilities. So that's an area you might want to tackle first. And then it's deliver. And I think the easy wins are really important, and maybe it's not necessarily an area of high impact or high touch, but like websites and digital documents are areas where you can kind of show people, like, this is the way forward, this is the way, it's not that hard, we can get there, and so that's what I would call kind of low-hanging fruit. And then maintaining. Like, maintaining is important too, and this is an issue that we run into because we create a template and it's accessible. And I had a wonderful template that was approved by Jay when we redid our templates in 2020. And then it gets out into the wild as agencies use it. They go and they share it, save it on SharePoint, and then they modify it, and suddenly it's not accessible anymore. So you have to maintain the accessibility. And also, I will say this, legal documents, so when you're dealing with like contracts and stuff, they are particularly hard. And we found out when we created our template, and when you convert it to a PDF, we ran into issues with the PDF being accessible. It was taking all of the headers in our contracting document, and Adobe was interpreting them as images. So then you'd have to go and label your 100 headers with alt text, and that is not a way to live. That's not a way to do business, so we had to fix that. And this is where there's a lot of possibilities out there for you. We didn't have anyone in our agency that was an accessibility expert, so I picked one, and she's the executive aide to our management team, and she took accessibility training. I got her in touch with Jay. I also got her in touch with some like experts at Department of Employment and Economic Development who are they know a lot of the weird little nuances, even with like legal documents, to show her, and there are resources for her when she has questions. And it was like actually really she's got a whole new skill set to put on her resume because she learned about accessibility. And I hope she's with us for a long time, but if she's not, then that knowledge is shared and deployed elsewhere. So you can train people within your own agencies to develop a comfort with accessibility, and then you are more likely to be able to maintain those documents and keep them accessible. And we in our office started, and we'll link to the training, but we had a goal that if there are people that are handling and creating documents, that they should take this accessibility training. And I can't find Sarah, but she's here with me. Sarah she said it was the best training that she has ever taken as a state employee. So that's selling Jay's training. But it's excellent, and it's available to all of you. It's available to the people within your agencies. So I think actually having the culture of accessibility within your agency matters, and communicating that it matters, and it's not just an ADA standard. It's something that makes a difference in people's lives. It allows them to preserve their independence and not have to have a legal document read out loud to them. So it's important, and and I kind of liken it to like when I had a child. I'm suddenly I'm pushing this stroller all over the world, and you quickly learn where there are curb cuts, where there are not curb cuts. I know I love the corner store in my neighborhood that I can walk to, but trying to go through that door and back a stroller into it is a pain, and that's where once you start accessibility, you realize it's exactly like that, where the world is better, the world is different, and it works better. And I think when people take Jay's training, they realize this is a better way to live. And I took a screenshot of a document that we fixed, and you looked at the navigation on the document, it was all jumbled, it was all over the place. And if you wanted to go look at your liability terms, it was hard to find them. But now it's they're listed in this section, and it's so much nicer. You can go right to where you want to go on that contract document. But make digital accessibility the expectation in every solicitation that you put out. I can't think of anything that we're procuring that it doesn't apply to. It matters in just about every, it's we buy snowplows that likely have more technology built into them than the spaceship that went to the moon for the first time. So that's the world we're living in, where everything, we're seeing more and more technology integrated into things that we maybe didn't expect. So the top tips for ADA readiness. So this is something, these two things, you guys can do this now. You can plagiarize the state of Minnesota's documents and our standards. You're welcome to do that. We don't care. We want to spread that and share it. So building it into solicitation and contract documents, your belt and suspenders, that's something we could go do tomorrow. Train internal resources on digital accessibility, especially so they can evaluate the vendor capabilities. You're not always going to find a J, so you need to have it within your agency so you're not reliant and waiting, because J is only one person and he can only be on so many evaluation teams, so you need to have them within your own agencies and encourage other agencies to do so as well. Engage in accessibility testing for websites, software, and other digital content. And really focus on those areas. Many of us have a lot of work to do, and I'm not gonna stand up here and say that we're perfect at the state of Minnesota. We're undertaking a huge effort to get every single document accessible, and it takes a long time. It's a project, and it's you have to keep, it's we all know, I got one of the little dumpster fires, and we know that those dumpster fires come up and they maybe distract us from these bigger, more important efforts, but just stay persistent and keep on fixing your stuff. And then remediating or replacing inaccessible content. And then I would say that list of vendors is really helpful for the accessibility testing. To have a vendor that will come in, a third party, and do that accessibility testing from beginning, middle, and end. And the other thing that I think to just be wary about is now that we're all getting held to this standard, there's some unscrupulous vendors that are popping up, and they're promising us the world, just push a button and I will make the system accessible. It's as easy as that, and it'll be, and as Jay told me, some of that, these vendors can actually make things worse. So you have to watch your accessibility testing vendors as well. And that's why I like that we have a trusted list of them at the state of Minnesota, and that's something that you guys can do as well. And when you engage them, that's something that you probably want someone with a very thorough understanding of accessibility to be evaluating those vendors. And then I think this one's really important, and it's like everyone has to start somewhere. And sometimes it's like that light bulb moment, like maybe, you know, it's like, wow, like how awful to have a contract read out loud to you, a legal document, and they have that light bulb moment, but not everyone's going to have that. And you have to just, you know, roll up your sleeves and start somewhere. I think a great place to start is with those accessibility quick cards. Have them on your desk and have those accessibility checkers up on the Microsoft Word applications as you're working in them. And then I would say taking Jay's training. But overall, I think having the culture of accessibility in your organizations makes it easier. It makes everybody more understanding of the extra steps that we need to take to get to this place. So anyways, you know, I would say we're going to offer some resources. The State of Minnesota Office of Accessibility website is wonderful. There is training on there, so everything from documents, maps, meeting, like how to have an inclusive meeting. That training is available to you for free, so like take advantage of it. You can post it, you can link on your website to ours. Like feel free to do that. Jay, you know, when I went to train a bunch of you know, employment law lawyers, Jay's like, just spread the quick cards, spread the training. We want people to take it. I mentioned the quick cards. And there's policy and standards as well. And I do want to mention the quick cards are available via PDF. So if you want to share those within your own organization, you can grab that PDF. And then we have our policies and our standards up there. And then I'm going to let Jay talk about these other resources.
Okay, thank you, Jay. You had in your NASPO app, you can download this PDF, and it's a accessible PDF to yourself, and then you have access to all of these links. So I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I'll make sure that we have time for questions. These folks have a very cool thing. This is actually a microphone. And if anybody has a question, we can throw it to you. And we have a question over here. The lady's going to give you one there. And then we'll wrap up with all the rest of the links. I want to make sure we have time.
So I'm in Colorado, and we have our own statute that was passed a few years ago for accessibility. And we recently had another statute passed about language that has to be in our contracts about accessibility as well. And we do get, I would say, quite a bit of pushback from vendors and contractors. And I'm just wondering, from your point of view, like, first, are you also seeing that pushback? And second, are you seeing that vendors are aware of the federal requirements coming next year? Or, because I haven't noticed that, so I'm wondering what you've noticed.
Sure. Well, this is Jay. First of all, I know Karen Pellegrin from your state. Every state should have somebody like me, and Karen Pellegrin and people on her team are doing that. And I would quickly mention that next month, and most of you know about NASCIO, National Association of State CIOs. They are sponsoring a accessibility summit with one person, a person like my job, or whoever's leading the accessibility for that state, to go at NASCIO's time to meet and talk about just this stuff. So if please contact your CIO and ask if they tap that person or they have that person. If they don't, encourage them to find someone like I was talking to Indiana, we're talking about your experienced person, whoever. Anyway, so actually the last 5 years has seen quite an improvement in vendors being more aware about accessibility. We used to get vendors saying, you're the only one asking for this. That's not true anymore because we're talking among ourselves. We now know who our contacts are. We're all telling each other about it. So there's less pushback. But yes, there continues to be pushback. And all we have to do, not all, but one thing to do is we're not the only one. Every state, and that's what this is now federal law. After next year, we are obligated to do this. It's not us, it's everybody else. They're telling us to do it. So we can make it clear that it's not about you. It's now state and federal law. So that's one element. The other element is things don't have to be accessible right away. You'll find that when we receive solicit, information like the VPAS that she's talking about, which is an accessibility conformity report, the best one often show their flaw. They're saying, this is what's working, this is what's not working. If they say everything is perfect, don't believe them. Trust me, don't believe them. So they will identify issues. What you want is a vendor that will work with you, that will try to continually improve. So if they're pushing back, talk to them. We'll find out, we talk to them carefully, they realize why it's important, and then they want to work with you, because if they can't sell to you, they can't sell to anyone. They're going to lose the entire market of government entities all across the state because of Title II. I hope that helps.
There's a lot. I just wanted to add. There's a lot of truth in. We're all in this together, and I will also plug my other favorite topic, which is innovative procurement. And we have found a lot of success doing invitation to negotiate. And you have two vendors, you like them both, both can perform, they both are going to do a great job. Sometimes accessibility is the factor that pushes one vendor over the edge as compared to the other. It's like, okay, we're going to get this and we need this, and this other vendor is not showing that like robust understanding and ability. So that's another area to deploy it.
Right, so that's why we encourage you, when you're defining your scoring for your contract, be sure to give accessibility. We give at least 10% of score to the accessibility factor, so that can help put one accessibility over the other. Okay.
Yep. We've been doing what you've been saying as far as converting our own documents, because we post a lot of our information already for years and years, thanks to a lawsuit, as ADA accessible, but it's just still mind-boggling how much time it takes and, you know, the PDF. Is there any other technology that's out there or that's coming that's going to make that process faster?
For document?
Yeah, well, and I said last night, I said, can't like Microsoft come up with its own version of Adobe?
Yeah, I mean, just...
Okay, two things. Number one, if you create an accessible template, let's say Microsoft Word, and you can borrow ours, we can send you our templates if you want to do that. There is a way to put those templates backstage into Word. It's not hard. So that when you open up a Word document, you click New, the templates are there. The reason why that's important, two things. One, it makes it available to everyone, so it's low-hanging fruit. They're starting with an accessible document. Number two, they can't mess with it. They can't accidentally change it. So that's a good way to make, so by putting it there, to have an accessible Word document. That's step one. Step two, we use a tool called Common Look PDF. And it's a powerful tool for PDF remediation. The plugin for Adobe Acrobat Pro. And so with Adobe Acrobat, if you have like 10 issues of the same issue, you have to do it 10 times. In Common Look, you do it once, and it fixes the other 9. So it's more efficient. However, it also requires a lot more training. It's a very sophisticated document that you have to use often, so we encourage a workflow where you've got the content creators making accessible Word documents, people who know basic Acrobat for a simpler document, and then Common Look for people who have to do the more complex one. So we have about 150 people throughout the state of Minnesota on a statewide contract using Common Look for the more complex document. We find that to be a pretty good way to do things. Anybody else?
All right, well, thank you all for your, oh, there's one over here. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So you spoke about how Minnesota incorporates the accessibility guideline requirements in the contract and also in final deliverables. How do you, I guess I'm trying to figure out how deep it is in your procurement. So like, for instance, do you require submitting vendors proposals also meet accessibility guidelines? Yeah.
Probably something that we should do.
As responsiveness or what?
But no, we don't require
Okay.
that they submit accessible documents. But they probably should, because, you know, it's like I said, we shouldn't be able to like pick and choose like who can be on an evaluation team because they can't review those proposals. I think it's something that will get better as you know, as we go along. As more vendors become familiar, like I do think more organizations are going to be developing this culture of accessibility. It is going to become more prevalent.
And also, your first step is yourself. Is you can have your RFPs accessible. Then you're ready to make them require the vendor. So that's one of the issues first, making sure you have your own house in order. And at some point of all taken, in the state of Minnesota, Executive Order 1914, which became 1015, I think, required hiring more people with disabilities in state government because we want the government to look like the people it represents. And that's the second thing I always tell people. We're a government. We can't pick who we serve. Okay? So we want to make sure everything we do works for everyone. And so with that, we have all these links that you can use here for like quick reference guide. And then she mentioned the accessibility checker in Microsoft has become much better. But we actually have a document, we should have linked on here, I did not, but I can share it with Rachel and you all, it's on our website. Yes, expectation for accessible document. Because you'll find that some vendors think they know accessibility, they don't. Or they do a click the checker, we're good. They're not good. So we have an actual document for how to review a document to make sure it's accessible. And you're welcome to steal that from our website. If you got the question, and we've gone over time. I'm going to be here till about 1:30, then I'm going to the airport. So if you have questions, come talk to me now. I'll be available at any time.
Thank you.